Okay, so this is the second video for scenario 2, and we're going to come back and look at the question of should they trade. So, well, should they trade? And the answer is going to be yes, they should trade. Even though they can make both goods, it's cheaper to specialize towards the thing that they're good at in terms of low opportunity cost, and then instead buy the things from the other country that they're not quite as good at, again, in terms of opportunity cost. So it's cheaper to buy from the other country than to make it themselves, essentially. So we expect this trade to follow comparative advantage. So we should expect that the U.S. is going to send corn to Mexico, and that in turn Mexico will send avocados to the U.S. Right? That's the pattern we expect, and we expect this based on the comparative advantage, and so that's the beginning of what we're going to do. And so let's then what we want to do in this section is we want to show that if they specialize and then trade, that both countries can be better off. And what specifically we want to show that they can get more production and more consumption. Okay. In order to start this off, we need to assume what they're doing right now. Now, it doesn't have to be true that this is exactly right, but we have to assume what they're doing currently just so we have a comparison point. Okay, and you could assume something different than what I'm assuming right now. I'm just doing this for just to show as an example. Okay, so let's assume right now the US is doing 50-50. So right now the US is consuming here. So this U is where the US is currently consuming. So currently the US is consuming half of its corn production and half of its ability to do avocado. So it's in the middle, right? It's not to one extreme or the other. And this is a pretty reasonable assumption because generally people like variety, and so it's not very often that you would see a person or a country choosing to consume only at one extreme, right? So people eat corn every single day and nothing else, or people eat avocados every single day and nothing else. It's more likely that people actually like a mixture of the two, and then I'll label the current consumption of Mexico as with this M. Okay, so that's where they currently are, and this is going to be our point of comparison. Now, the first thing we're going to have them do is we're going to have them, they specialize production. Okay, so what that means is they move towards the thing that they are in the area where they have comparative advantage. So they're going to specialize production in the area where they have comparative advantage. So they move towards the thing that they have comparative advantage in. So what that means is we would expect then the US moves here. I'm just going to call this point C, right? So they move their production. They specialize their production. So instead of producing a little of both, they're just going to produce one. Now, we don't have to go to this extreme of what this is called complete specialization. They could also do partial specialization where they just move like somewhere along that line. That's a less extreme point of view, but I'm just going to do the extreme one because it's easier to explain and easier to understand. And then Mexico does also complete specialization, so they move to this point A, right? They also specialize their production. So they're no longer producing both things. Now they're specializing their production, and they're going to do this so that they can then go ahead and trade. Okay, so then the next thing I do, we'll say, well, what happens to the production, right? So our first question is, well, what happened to the total production? So what happened to production by specializing? So this is the result of specialization. So let's look at, we have to do this, we have to look at before, and then we have to look at after. Okay, so before, this is when they were not going to trade, and then we got to look at now. So with now is with specialization. This is only half of the problem, this first part. Okay, so before, let's see, corn, as you can see from the graph above, the US was doing 50 and Mexico was doing 30, so total was 80. And now with the US specializing in corn, the corn is now 100, right? So we can say that, well, we gained 20 units of corn. So the two economies together, it hasn't been shared yet, but the two economies together have gained 20 units of corn compared to where they were at before. And then avocados, right? Before was US was producing 10 and Mexico was producing 60, so it's a total of 70. And now the avocado is 120. It's a huge gain. So they got 50 avocados more. Okay, so they got a huge gain by specializing their production compared to what they were doing before, but they haven't shared it yet, right? So we're not really sure if this would make them better off. So in order to make them better off, we have to trade, because we kind of think Mexico wouldn't like to produce all avocados if they have to eat all the avocados themselves and don't have anything else to eat them with, right? And just like the U.S. would not like to produce just corn if they have to eat just the corn themselves and nothing else to consume them together with. So really we need trade in order to see that we are actually better off, right? So we got more production, so we've confirmed that we do have more production, but we need trade in order to get more consumption. So now we're going to go to the trade.